Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever been listening to the radio, maybe late at night, and something just weird happened? Something truly strange, unsettling. I mean, we've all heard static, right? Or a drop signal, maybe a song cuts out. But what about something that genuinely makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up? Today, we're taking a deep dive into a collection of experiences shared by people who encountered just that, radio broadcasts that just veered wildly into the mysterious, the terrifying, and the utterly bizarre.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Radio technology, I mean, it's designed for clear communication. But sometimes it seems to become this sort of conduit for the unknown. We're going to explore a series of accounts today from different people who found themselves hearing transmissions that really challenged their understanding of reality. It gives us a glimpse into these moments where the ordinary just met the extraordinary. These aren't just, technical glitches. They're stories that stick with you. They linger. Makes you wonder what else might be out there, riding those unseen waves.
Exactly. So our mission today is really just to recount these tales, share the specific chilling details, and maybe, just maybe, uncover some patterns in these really unsettling sonic encounters. We begin back in 2004. We have a listener recalling a Finnish radio DJ. His name was Jens too. Jens was apparently a twilight DJ on a local station, known for his chilled-out conversation. Discussing topical events, issues, playing the occasional bit of music. The listener says he was inoffensive and level-headed, never really did anything out of the ordinary, just a calm voice for the late hours. But then one night, everything changes. Jens is chatting with a caller, and just out of the blue, someone, presumably his producer, enters the studio, urgently says, "We need to go now." And the listener remembers Jens' reply distinctly, "Are you serious?" Then a pause, a brief one, and then just, "Okay." The caller cut off immediately, just gone. The listener could actually hear Jens leaving the room in a hurry, scuffling sounds maybe. Then a couple of minutes of just dead air, silence, before the station just started playing music again, like nothing happened. But what made this really unsettling, according to the listener, wasn't just how abrupt it was Jens' reaction, or lack of reaction, his lack of surprise. He didn't even ask why they needed to leave. It was, and I quote, like they were expecting it or something. Mm-hmm. And after that night, a new host took over, Jens too. His name was never mentioned again, I said, like he just vanished. That goes who. The listener talks about trying to find information about him online, years later even. Said if you Google him, nothing comes up, just nothing. No info on what happened, nothing about him before the disappearance, not even on YouTube. It's as if his entire existence seems to have been wiped from the internet. The listener knows other people must remember him. People called into his show all the time. But there's just nothing online. Not even a forum discussion somewhere, a complete erasure.
What's really fascinating here and deeply unsettling is that apparent erasure. The completeness of it points to something beyond just, someone quitting their job. The lack of surprise in his voice you mentioned, it suggests maybe some kind of pre-existing awareness, like he knew this could happen. It makes his disappearance feel less random, maybe more pre-planned, or even orchestrated. Raises a big question. Was this voluntary, or was something else entirely at play?
That digital footprint vanishing, that's the really chilling part in our age, isn't it? How does someone just disappear online?
It's incredibly difficult, which suggests perhaps resources or coordination beyond an individual simply deciding to go offline. It leaves the listener, and now us, with this profound sense of unease, a mystery with no resolution, amplified by the digital void.
Okay, moving from a vanishing person to, a vanishing road, almost. This next one is about an eerie coincidence. Imagine this. You're driving really late one night on some country road in the middle of a storm. Visibility is terrible. The driver was going super slow, really worried about the conditions. Suddenly they're listening to a pop station, their usual station, and the song playing just cut out, and a completely different song came on. Something called A Pod Is Waiting by a band named E-Monster, described as a weird song, definitely not pop music, something you'd never expect on that station. And the song didn't start at the beginning. It came on near the end, where apparently the music goes kind of messed up and this mournful wailing starts up in the background. Creepy enough already, right? But here's where it gets really spine-chilling. The line, "When your time has come, it's come," played on the radio right as the car hit a massive dip. A chunk of the road had completely broken off. Gone. The driver says they very nearly went flying into the ditch. They missed rolling my car by the skin of my teeth. They're certain they would have been seriously hurt, if not straight up killed, if the car had gone in. And after that terrifying near miss, after that perfectly timed, horrifying lyric, the radio station went right back to normal, playing dumb pop music. just snapped back. The driver never heard that song or that band on the station ever again.
Wow. I mean, that raises a really important question about coincidence, doesn't it? The sheer terrifying perfection of that timing. Was it just a random station error, a glitch? Or was there some kind of uncanny, almost prophetic alignment between the broadcast and that life-threatening moment, the precision of it, that specific line at that exact instant? It really makes you wonder if there was something else at play there beyond just pure chance.
It's the kind of story that just sticks with you, that lyric at that moment. Hard to just brush off as coincidence.
Absolutely. It taps into that feeling that sometimes maybe the universe sends a signal, or maybe our minds create meaning from chaos in extreme moments. Either way, deeply unsettling.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. This next one involves an unexplained interruption during a talk show. Happened in Southern California. A listener was working an overnight shift at a scrapyard. Around 2 a.m., listening to a local talk show, the host was doing a pretty lighthearted segment, actually. Something about the worst way anyone's ever broken up with you. But the listener noticed something else. Throughout the segment, they could faintly hear someone in the mic, or maybe in the background, telling the host what to do, giving instructions, which, is pretty normal for a producer or showrunner. But then the host started talking intermittently about something else entirely, a story that was apparently breaking locally. And she described it as having, quote, some extremely odd circumstances. And here's where it takes a really dark turn. The host mentioned several officers were engaged and had gone missing. She also added that there were shots fired as well. And the listener heard the host repeat 2 or 3 police codes that were seemingly being fed to her by that background voice.
Right, and police codes, they're shorthand, used for speed and sometimes discretion over the radio. Things like incident type, severity. If she's repeating multiple codes related to officers missing and shots fired, it implies a serious, unfolding emergency, something likely sensitive, maybe chaotic, happening in real time.
Exactly. It sounded urgent, developing, but then, all at once, it just stopped. The signal just dropped. The station went silent except for crackling. Dead air again. After a few minutes, maybe 5, the broadcast came back on. They apologized for the broadcast going down, technical difficulties, and they just went on with the show as normal. Like nothing happened. But here's the critical detail. They never mentioned the story again. Not a word. Someone actually called in later asking about the dating segment, but also asked what the deal was earlier. And the hosts, they didn't even acknowledge the question about the earlier incident, just ignored it.
See, if we connect this to how local emergencies are usually handled, that silence and denial is what's really disturbing. A report about missing officers, shots fired, that's significant. For it to be broadcast, then suddenly cut, then completely ignored. It's deeply unsettling. It makes you question everything. Was it a hoax? A mistake? Or was information being deliberately suppressed? That deliberate omission, especially after a caller directly asked, that raises powerful questions about what was truly happening off air. Why the secrecy?
It feels almost more sinister than the initial report, doesn't it? The cover-up or the sudden clampdown on information makes you wonder what they didn't want people to know. Okay, our next story connects radio to a specific place and a past tragedy. It was near Halloween 2005. A listener was waiting for her husband, tuning into a local station, doing a segment on haunting experiences. She was already interested in the paranormal, so she was listening closely. The first caller was a man from Elton, Maryland, which was significant because the listener used to live there. This man starts describing all kinds of freaky stuff happening in his townhouse, the usual suspects, voices, moving things, stuff like that.
Right.
But then the caller connects these happenings to something specific, something chilling. Pan Am Flight 214. December 1963.
Yes, the flight that crashed near Elkton after being struck by lightning. A terrible tragedy. Everyone on board was killed.
Yeah. Exactly. And the crash site, Elkton, Maryland. And here's where it gets really personal and creepy for the listener. The caller describes where the plane crashed, the specific location, and says that was where his townhouse was. A whole development had been built right on the crash site. Now, here's the listener's connection. It gave her chills. She says, back in 2001, I was 19 and homeless, and she stayed with various friends. One friend lived in that exact same housing development built on the crash site. And the listener says she could never sleep there no matter what I did. She was constantly woken by voices, bangs, just couldn't rest. Her friend apparently noticed weird shit happening too, but was religious and didn't really want to talk about it much. Hearing that caller years later describe the same location and similar phenomena brought all those unsettling memories back.
What's fascinating here from a paranormal perspective is this idea of residual energy. How history, especially intense tragedy, can leave this palpable imprint on a physical space. It's not just a general haunting story. It's specifically linked to the ground itself, the site of a catastrophic event. And it suggests that maybe some individuals, like the listener and perhaps the caller, are more sensitive to these echoes of the past. It makes you consider the lingering energy of profound loss, especially sudden, violent loss, and how it might manifest.
So it's like the event itself leaves a mark on the place, not necessarily individual ghosts.
That's one prominent theory, yes. Place memory. The idea that strong emotions or events can be recorded in the environment. And certain conditions or certain people might be able to perceive these recordings as voices, sounds, or just a feeling of deep unease. It connects the radio call, the personal experience, and the historical event in a really compelling way.
Okay, this next one isn't exactly radio, but involves a baby monitor, which, as the source points out, is a sort of radio, I guess. Fair enough. One night, a listener's at her friend's house. The friend is putting her little boy to bed. The baby monitor setup is pretty standard. Camera at the foot of the crib, mattress sensor. So they're watching a movie later. The monitor receiver is on the coffee table. Suddenly, the sound sensor spikes and the screen goes white. Just static, maybe. Or pure white. The friend picks it up, and as the image clears a bit, all you can make out on the screen is an eerie face. They immediately jump up, run into the baby's room. But the kid is sound asleep, totally undisturbed. They look around, check everything, see nothing unusual. So they go back to the movie, maybe a little spooked. About 10 minutes later, the same thing happens. Sound spikes, screen flares. This time, the listener decides to be quick and quiet. She sneaks into his room. And she catches the child standing up in his crib with his face right against the monitor. He was apparently smiling like crazy and giggling, looking right into the camera. When he sees the listener looking at him, he quickly lays down and acts like he's asleep. Okay, so mystery solved, right? Just the kid being mischievous. The listener tells her friend, who laughs it off. Figures her son was just playing a prank. Makes sense. But here's the kicker. The part that makes this truly chilling. A few nights later, she tells me the exact same thing happened to the monitor, but her boy was sitting on the couch next to her at the time.
And that changes everything, doesn't it? That raises a huge question. The initial incident, easily explained away as the child, plausible deniability. But the second time, if the child was verifiably not in the crib, sitting right next to his mom, then what or who produced that same eerie face on the monitor? It completely dismantles the rational explanation and introduces something deeply unsettling, something unexplained, using this everyday device.
Exactly. It goes from kids being kids to, well, something else entirely, looking through that camera. Brr. Okay, let's talk about something definitely radio, but intentionally mysterious. Number stations. You might have heard of these, maybe not. They're these really enigmatic radio stations. They basically just broadcast a string of numbers, sometimes with tones or data bursts mixed in. The common theory, the widely accepted one, is that they're covert messages to spies. Though officially, no one's really sure. Governments don't typically confirm these things. Our listener mentions actually hearing one live once, coming from Cuba. It's nicknamed Spanish Lady because it's a woman's voice reading off numbers in Spanish with data bursts in between. Imagine tuning into that accidentally. And apparently on YouTube, you can find recordings of others. Some creepy recordings, the listener says. Some stations aren't active anymore, but the recordings live on. But there's one in particular they highlight, one where the beginning of the broadcast is a really creepy music box sounding song. And then, after the music box, there's the voice of a young girl just reading off numbers. The listener just says, something about it is super creepy. That combination, the innocent sound, the secret message.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, number stations are just fascinating, aren't they? They represent this intersection of government secrecy, Cold War espionage perhaps, and this really unsettling ambiguity. They exist in this hidden landscape of radio waves, these coded messages floating out there. The idea of these voices, sometimes robotic, sometimes strangely human like the Spanish Lady, or even childlike broadcasting into the ether, meant for who knows who. It evokes this profound sense of unseen forces, a hidden world operating just beneath the surface of our everyday reality. The creepiness comes from the unknown purpose and the unknown recipient.
It's like listening in on secrets you were never meant to hear. Very eerie. Our next story takes us to Washington, D.C. downtown. And a moment of pure panic thanks to the old emergency broadcast system. Remember the EBS? That really loud, long tone on the radio, usually followed by, "This is a test." Well, this time the listener hears the tone. But instead of the test message, the announcement says, "Stand by for an important broadcast." Now, context is key here. The listener was inside of the Washington Monument, downtown D.C. Their mind immediately leaped to the absolute worst-case scenario. Cold War thinking, maybe. They thought if missiles were on the way, I was going to be cindered in less than 15 minutes. For about 30 seconds, which must have felt like an eternity, they just pondered what would happen next, staring at the monument. And, quote, it wasn't fun. Thankfully, the actual announcement came quickly after that pause. It was that there was a fire at the D.C. police armory, and that a 2-block radius near it would be blocked off or evacuated. A serious local issue, for sure, but not the apocalypse. The listener concluded, talk about relieved, worst radio message I ever almost heard.
What's really striking here is how powerful suggestion is, how a tiny deviation in expected language, just changing "this is a test" to "stand by for an important broadcast," how that small change in that specific location could trigger such immediate, profound existential dread. It really highlights our underlying anxieties about safety, about catastrophe, the power of just a few unexpected words from an official source to plunge someone into a terrifying personal crisis, even momentarily. It shows how vulnerable our sense of security can be to uncertainty broadcast over the airwaves.
30 seconds of thinking the world is ending. Yeah, I can imagine the relief when it was just a fire. Okay, our final story tonight is different. It's more personal, but it still involves radio being used in a deeply unsettling way. A listener's great-grandmother was described as mentally unstable. She experienced hallucinations, like seeing thousands of ants crawling on the walls. She would also hear voices. She was living in an apartment at the time, getting ready to move into an old folks' home. Now, she started claiming that her radio would start talking to her, telling her what she was wearing and saying awful things about her, just cruel personal attacks. Her daughter, the listener's mother, was concerned, of course, but figured it was part of her mother's mind slipping, just more hallucinations. But then a crucial incident happened. The listener and their mother were staying with the great-grandmother for a night. They're all watching TV in the living room. The great-grandmother's radio was playing quietly in the kitchen, when all of a sudden this creepy cackling laughter came over it through the radio. The voice then laughed and began telling my grandmother she was crazy and how she would always be alone for the voices to get her. Horrible stuff. The listener, just a kid at the time, ran screaming to her mom, who had also heard it clearly. Her mom didn't hesitate. She called the cops immediately. The long story short, as the listener puts it, the conclusion was, well, both disturbing and surprisingly mundane in a way. My great-grandmother's neighbor was an ex-military guy who got a kick out of tuning into a radio frequency and terrorizing her. Man, he was deliberately broadcasting abuse to her over her own radio.
And this just raises a deeply unsettling point about human cruelty, doesn't it? While the explanation isn't supernatural, the reality is almost worse. The deliberate, calculated psychological torment inflicted on a vulnerable person, using something as simple as radio technology. It shows how easily accessible radio frequencies can be, especially older analog ones, perhaps with some basic equipment. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the monster isn't a ghost or an alien signal, but a malicious person exploiting technology for cruel purposes, turning an ordinary object into a weapon.
What a truly awful thing to do. It really makes you think. The explanation is human, but the act itself is horrifying. So we've journeyed through quite a bit tonight. Vanishing DJs, near-fatal coincidences, voices on baby monitors that shouldn't be there, cryptic number stations, emergency alerts gone wrong, and even, well, deliberate, malicious broadcasts, all tied together by this thing we often take for granted, radio. Each story offers this unique mix of the bizarre, the terrifying, the unexplained, reminding us how easily the familiar can become profoundly unsettling.
It definitely raises that important question, doesn't it? About the unseen forces, the untold stories swirling around us. Are these genuine anomalies? Are they glitches? Are they disturbing human actions disguised as something else? Or just the uncanny way fate sometimes seems to align with a broadcast signal. We've certainly explored how a simple audio transmission, something so common, can suddenly become a portal to the unexplained, to moments of intense fear, or sometimes, sadly, to just plain human darkness.
It makes you think, doesn't it? So, the next time you tune into your favorite station, maybe late at night, or even if you just hear static, what other unheard, unsettling signals might be traveling through the airwaves around you? Just out there, waiting to be discovered. Keep your ears open and maybe keep your mind curious too. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into these strange and disturbing radio stories. If you enjoy these tales, if they gave you a chill or made you think, and you want to explore more fascinating, sometimes terrifying topics with us, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Horror Docs. That way you won't miss any future deep dives. We'll see you next time.